Well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast here, live. Hope all is well with you all, and thanks so much for tuning in. A bit late today. I had a telephone call I had to take care of that pushed me back by an hour, but nonetheless, good to have you on board here, gang. And so far, so good. I just thought we started. This is going to be Volumetrics Part 2. And just for those of us, just to be sure that we understand, I'm going to go through a real quick review and not necessarily spend a lot of time in the review process, but I think it's essential that we look at what this thing really means, because it's a very rare term used in the creative process, and it's called volumetrics. And really, everything we draw, everything we see, everything we can conceive of, as we said last week in our stream with the introduction to this whole process, was that everything you see here, for example, that rectangular forms, cones, spheres, cubes, and cylinders, they all have their own constitution in terms of what they do as volumetric. So they're actual volumes or three-dimensional pieces that become part of the whole puzzle and philosophy of putting together systems and design. So for example, anything you touch, anything you design, anything you create, when you break it all down, it's a product of these 5 basic solids. So it's a really interesting process to understand how it all begins to function. So as we said, the 5 basic solids are, again, these guys are in this little grouping right in here, and but they each have their own constitution. Notice, but there's another thing I want to really stress before I go into another session here in terms of sketch rendering. Notice what happens to these guys when you begin to render them. And we made a very large issue and a very strong point last week about making certain that when we get into a situation here, there are really things affecting these volumes that begin to influence how they're rendered. And the biggest aspect is light. Notice what happens. My light source is out here, for example, from the left-hand side, coming into these objects. Notice how it goes from light to dark, and then dark to light. We made a very large, in almost every case, light to dark, dark to light. And again, and this is a really unique one here. We're going to save our conversation for that in just a moment here. But again, same process, light to dark, and then dark to light. And the reason that takes place is for one simple reason. You have a direct light source on the object itself. It's going to be the highest intensity of light closest to the light source. As you move toward the breaking edge or the leading edge here, for example, this little highlight there means an awful lot. That little strip of light right there says an awful lot about volumetrics, how you deal with it. That's the point at which the form turns a corner. For example, it goes from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So you leave a little bit of that shape right in there to tell the viewer that that's turning the corner, so to speak, to take you from right to left. In this case, pardon me, left to right. But notice again, same process here with the cube. We're actually moving a little bit of light source in there to kind of tell us where that is actually taking change in direction. And the most sophisticated one of them all, for example, as far as I'm concerned, is the conical form. And very interesting how it all, again, light source out. Notice we didn't start, for example, in the cone form, we didn't start right against the edge. What we started to do was the following. We move it inboard a little bit, then go to the dark, then back to light, and then all of a sudden, direct light, reflected light. This is what's happening in every case. Same thing here. Light source out, we came inboard a little bit, began to tone it, going from light to dark, and then back to reflected light again. Those things become extremely paramount when you're dealing with complicated forms such as this. And the rectangular form down below, laying it down is a different set of circumstances. Notice the light source is coming in from the front, so we actually drive the shadow back. And notice what happens again. Very strong edge, a little bit of a highlight right in here again to tell you where the corner is being turned. And again, notice dark to light, reflected light, and again, direct light back to shadow. So really strange how it all begins to function. Most of the reflected light in this case is going to come back in this corner here, not up on top because of the shadow definition. So that's a real quick review here of why we talk about these volumetrics and why they're being so critical to deal with. And again, I can't stress enough throughout the course of this stream, like we did last week, the whole process of working with volumetrics is learning how to combine them to create new shapes and new vocabulary. We're developing everything from transportation design, product design, architecture, exterior and interior, anything we deal with as a product of that. So we started there. And again, the second part of the review is this. We go back in there again, review what these guys begin to look like in terms of how to develop, again, direct light, and into dark to light, and a little bit of the highlight here, then turn the corner, and again, dark to reflected light. These are a combination of things we talked about in the first few moments here. Again, combination of the cylindrical form, conical form. What that, again, notice how that pattern remains the same with light to dark and how light operates in these cases. A sphere, for example. I'm sorry. Let me go back to this guy just for a moment. This is the most difficult monster of all. The sphere is always referred to as a zero reference form. In other words, it doesn't have an edge. It doesn't have a contour in terms of dark to light or front to back or whatever. There's really no reference on the thing, so you have to be very careful about how that's illustrated. I'll go into that a little bit later as to why we illustrate lights. Notice, direct light source onto it, and again, notice that crescent shape. That tells me that form is round. And again, it's very simple, but it has no reference whatsoever. So you literally drive the tone back to the light source and develop a crescent to tell you where that light source or where that reflected light or shadow light is going to take place on that form. Zero reference, very difficult process to deal with. So let's go back to this page. Pardon me for missing out on that. Again, back to that same surface again. Notice light source coming in from over here. A lot of light up on top, letting the paper do the work, into the core down below, and then adding that little conical shape, cone to sphere, to develop this element. Notice again how we're trying to combine shapes and what they begin to do. Very interesting. Look at this cylinder, a bit more, a little rounder. And again, the end cap is like a secant through a sphere. So you add that little secant of a sphere onto that cylinder and cut into it with a parabolic line in developing shape. It all comes down to understanding how these geometric forms work. It's amazing how it all comes together. Now, let me stop right there. Am I communicating all right so far, gang? Is this making sense? It's a bit of a review, but I just thought it was essential to go back into this before we started the second half, which is a few moments away here. We're going to go into some rendering work as a result of this conversation. So I'll just hold on for a second and see how you think, and we'll go from there. Well, now we've gotten there, let's just kind of move on here for a little bit. And the second thing we did on that last week is, again, combine more form, for example. This is a very unusual page here, for example, where you actually can, again, Doc, it's a crazy, no problem, Shadow, I understand fully. Notice what happens again. Here we're taking a spherical form in the center of this vehicle and adding it with an inclined plane or a rectangle. Look how that begins to function in terms of taking the two shapes and begin to integrate them into a very solid form here. Interesting how it all, again, how this volumetric thing works. It's a combination of those elements, of those 5 solids, begin to develop anything you wish to. Again, sphere, and again, cone. Very exaggerated cone, but nonetheless, that's what that does. And adding into that, look how that graph point becomes very critical, and how you begin to combine the two shapes. Again, here's another inverted cone, and a rectangular form has been modified. Actually, you can actually say, in essence, it's really 2 cones, one interjecting from the upper and one from the lower. The last one, again, a bit of a spherical form and into a little bit of a conical shape underneath here. And it's just interesting how, again, how they all begin to work together. So let's based on that, with that whole concept, let's open up a couple more concepts and move it into some architectural stuff here. So let me just kind of get these sketches lined up, and we'll go from this one first. And we'll take that same process and put a little bit of highlight in this thing as we go through the lineup here. So let's do this. Let's go back in and say, okay, I want to develop an architectural piece that has this kind of character. I'm going to do a little plan view sketch here. So a little thumbnail. It's that rectangular form right there, being interrupted by another really strong rectangular form at 90 degrees to it. Then maybe a little bit of a shape up front, just kind of give it a little bit of a presence, and then just a little thumbnail study right there. Just a real quick little ideation sketch here. Again, rectangular form right here. Another rectangular form interrupting it in the vertical. And then getting into a little bit of maybe a walkway piece here that does this, and maybe it's an entry. That's a real quick little plan view study here. I'm keeping it nice and light because I'm going to develop a larger sketch here as we go. Now, looking at that, to convert it, that might look like this. Now, this is what it might look like in this little thumbnail sketch. Drive through it. Drive through it. Come back in with a little bit of retaining wall. Bring out of it here. And this is an architectural study here, remember. Going back in here for just a bit. Then we'll get that plane interrupting it in here and just drive that right through. This nice little thumbnail sketch here. There's the end cap there. There's the ground line. Let's take that over and extend it out. Let's take that in just a little bit. Put a bit of tone underneath this. There's a little thumbnail sketch, and then here's our support columns here. One there, and one the end cap. Let's kind of look at that, how it's simple. That's what this starts to look like in a thumbnail sketch up on top here. Here's the plan view. There's a little bit of a thumbnail study. Now let's enlarge that. Let's see what these volumes do. Let's come back in and say, oh, let's establish the leading edge. Let's drive that line through. Let's get a large rectangular piece in first. Architectural, learning how to work with volumetrics. There's its overall length. That comes through. Let's add that other form right on top of that. That comes in here vertically. Nice and loose there. Take it back just a touch. That's what that's going to do. That comes down, picks up a point right through here. Let's drive this viewer right back in here. Get the base of the building in place very loosely. Come back out to get that retaining wall that's in there. At that, I'm going to just block this in very quickly first, using volumetrics to get this thing to work. I'll come back out here. There's another pillar of support there. Little compensating right here, and then let's put this one in place. Let's put this one in place. This one in place. And the last one in place. So there's a little thumbnail set. There's how those volumes are beginning to work. For example, again, the plan view, looking at the overall rectangular shape and a real thin rectangular intersecting it. And then on top of that, a little bit of a foreground piece here for the retaining wall. So let's go a little further with this thing now. Let's go back and start putting some tone in this thing. At the underside of the building, that kind of just nicely laid in here. Start putting some tone together. Tone that in. A bit of a bold line here, bold line there. Let's get this guy to read a little bit. Let's come down the line. And I go back in through here, get that tone in place, get that tone in place. Column, into column, into column, and back out of it again. Let's go underneath here where that intersects. It does that. A little more tone. More impact in some of the underbelly of the building itself. Be a little bit stronger. A bit of tone in the columns. Real loose little sketch here. Let's come back in a little bit of detail here. Again, working with volumetrics, very bold rectangular forms here. Coming up on top, let's get this guy up. Let me turn this just a moment here, pardon me. Cast a bit of shadow on this guy. Let's run that through. A little bit of a detail. Oh, let's just switch gears here. Get this out of the way here. A bit of detail. Everybody kind of put that piece together now from an architectural point of view. Let's kind of tone this back just a bit more. Let's come underneath there and add some surface, actual reflection surface behind the, underneath the overhang here in the back of the building. A glass line in place. Let's put that shadow in here. Let's kind of reflect that, just a little bit of glass right in through here. Let's add some foliage in this guy. Get the retaining wall to work here. Suppose here, worthwhile stopping just for a moment and let you know, one of the nice things about this whole idea about volumetrics is notice how you can use it for any given situation, whether it's product design on a smaller scale or architecture on a larger scale. Amazing how it all begins to function here. So let's kind of carry on here. Got a nice strong accent line in here. A bit of shadow drop into this guy. And carry that same theme. Again, a little bit of backdrop here, some softscape, kind of give it a little bit of an envelope to kind of work within. There we are. I love these architectural views. Part of being, yeah, it's the idea, Doug. The idea is to get these, again, these solids. These guys become the culprit many times. We always ignore the fact that these guys are really instrumental. Everything we're doing here is a product of combining these forms. It's all that it really is. Just getting into some really freehand and again, combinations. In this case, it's working with the rectangular, both stretched and then again, one in the vertical. So good observation, Doug. Thank you very much. So I'm going to sharpen the stick here for a moment. I'm going to carry on here. Let's go back in through here and pick this up. Entryway, little sense of scale. Real lucid. That gives you some idea of what we're looking at here as far as scale goes. Interesting. So let's come back in and just tighten down a little bit more. A bit more shadow in this guy. And this one. And notice how we're just really animated now because the forms are in place. Let's go into this in shadow. Reflected light. And make sure we bounce this off a little bit where the light source is coming from. A little bit of shadow on the inside of that one, and just a little bit of there on the inside of that one. So it kind of gives them, and let's put it over the top here, just again too, where the recesses are. Come back underneath. This is all part of the process here, so that's all part of the building. So we kind of detail that in, just nice and easy. Come across to this retaining wall. This might be a small little fountain of some sort. Again, using the actual pencil itself to just kind of detail that in. Might be a little hardscape in between the two. Let's put that in place. Running across here. Again, another companion piece in through here. A little driveway, entry egress. Use that little parabolic curve in here for some foliage. Thick to thin. Well, section change tells where we are. Again, coming back in through here, a little bit of Yeah, see how that's all coming together now? This is a very simple, very interesting, very simple concept sketch in terms of, again, working with two. We started here with a plan view. So it looks like in the plan view. Then went to a nice simple little thumbnail study about what the perspective might look like. And we just took off on that and started doing some things here. Let's kind of do a little bit of shadow on these guys to get some impact in this stuff. Again, working with volumetrics, it's an open season in terms of what happens with that. Look, I mean, all of a sudden, that thing just starts to come to life. There's not an awful lot there, but you're dealing with volumes that really begin to tell the story. And I think that's the real trick of this whole, it's a terrible term, trick, but it's a real system of thinking here as how it all begins to function together. Now, let's just carry on here. Pardon me for rambling. Just want to finish it up here. Promenade or a plaza. A little low line shrubbery along the line here on this end. Again, using that side of that pencil, it's so instrumental in putting together texture. I mean, that guy, this thing is an absolute powerful tool. You can use it on the point of things to refer to sharpness. Let's do this. Let's get a break in this guy. Let's do this. Soft sculpture, or scape. Soft scape again, low shrubbery. Just really very loosely laying in a thumbnail sketch. I mean, I work with architects. I'm working with this kind of stuff all the time. Just really fast little thumbnail studies to put it all together here. So let's do this. Let's get that out of the way. Let's get that running through. Let's put a little bit of this in there too. And a little change of texture to give it a presence. Again, sorry to be redundant, but this is all a product of working with volumetrics. Two rectangular forms. This is what we begin to create. It's absolutely amazing what happens when you begin to combine the elements and make it really sing in terms of being very simple, but at the same time very effective. Now let's put a light, so let's put a little tone in here. That's where the light source is. That's where that is. Just kind of drop that down just a bit. There we are. There. Let me sharpen the stick again for a little bit here, gang. Thank you. And we're kind of tighten this down just a bit more. And come back in through here with a little bit of hardscape. Little symbolic corporate identity piece there, and there it is. Oh, pardon me, let's do this. A little bit of atmosphere in this and give it a backdrop or a little bit of a presence. And we haven't done architecture in quite some time, so it's a lot of fun. Just come back and a little bit of tone back here, then take off on it, a little bit of cloud pattern, just let that kind of run through the entire form. Tone it again. Line that vignette just a touch. And there you have a nice, quick and dirty little thumbnail study based on getting those volumes down and the volumetrics to work for us here. A very simple architectural sketch. I mean, I hope that kind of helped to get the point across over time. I'm just kind of tighten that down just a bit more here. We know where we are in space. That really, I think, hopefully tells a great story in terms of, oh, let's do this. Pardon me. This is closed off here, so we got to cast a bit of a shadow down into that area there. And that's that base of the building, and the base of the building, and the base of that strong element that comes through the actual form itself. So here again, there it is. What do you think, gang? So far, so good? Doug, making sense? It all comes down to understanding how the volumes work, how to function with them, where to place them, how to put them in context. Good. All right, let's kind of move along here. I've got another little study we'll do here very quickly. Again, staying with architecture. We haven't done this in quite some time, but I think it's a very interesting format to deal with. I'm just going to get a couple of pieces sharpened here. Go here, and then put this in place. Let's go back and do another little thumbnail study here. All right, first I'm going to work on the plan view. Then we're going to use the volumes and convert them into a little thumbnail study, and then begin to put together the same process we did in that previous sketch. So here's the plan view. I want to see a round form. It's going to be cylindrical, and then a rectangular form. I'm going to drop that back just a little bit, and then let's put some context to this thing. Here's my center line. Here's the plan view, looking down on the form itself, and then going around here, little driveway, access area. That's going to come back and do that, and again another circle around it, entry, and out of that center line, just a little bit of a break right there. Going to give me some softscape area here. So there's the actual body of the form right there. That's that shape. Again, this time we're going to combine a cylinder and a rectangle. There's my plan view study right there. That's all it's going to take right there. So a little thumbnail sketch. Let's do this. Let's kind of get this guy started. It's going to be an intersection around the center line. So I'm here. I'm going to come uphill. Get that form to come out. That real bold line in there. Take it back in context. Do that with it, and there's my cylinder. I'm just going to plant this thing in here in an elevation, so to speak. Get that to run, and then there's a circle around it, and that's that driveway area. Let's bring that on down. Bring it back in again. Again, the second one, come around it, and pick up that same little piece. There's my driveway here. There's my softscape. That's what that thumbnail, oh, pardon me, let's do this. Offset it. Real loose and easy. There's a little thumbnail study, a little vignette of what this is going to look like, for example, when I go into perspective. Just a real quick little thumbnail sketch. So let's get it started here. Up on top, let's get the circle down. Let's get that cylinder in place. Set that up. And pardon me as I turn this thing around here just a bit. Get that generated. Nice and easy first. Come back in and get that upper piece in place. There's the other half right there. There's the actual top itself. I'm going to come back in, drop that down, get that vertical in place. Now let's come up with that cantilever piece that comes off the actual cylinder itself. There it is there. There's the end cap. There's the end wall. Notice again, rectangular form, real thin against, again, a cylinder. Combining the elements are getting these volumetrics to really function for us here. So let's kind of go back into this. Then offset this guy just a bit. Draw through it. A little bit of shadow in here to kind of tell where the offset is. Let's get that line weight to come up. Let's go around the form now. There's A. Just laying a little bit of the foreground work in there now as you come out of it. Second piece, get that circle come around with the road. Break that out of there. Then again, off the center line of that hub. There is a basic composition. Let's get a little bit of this in place too. A little bit backdrop and vignette here. Off in the distance. Part of that whole landscaping piece here. Let's kind of just block those in real loosely. There's a real fast sketch here of what that thing might look like here. Let me just kind of sharpen the stick here, pardon me. And go through it. Let's put a little bit of detail in this forward plane here. Change the pace a little bit. Behind it. And again, back to ground line, and then just a couple of nice little pieces back here to kind of soften it off just a touch. Driveway, roadway, and let's kind of bring this around here. I'm going to start bringing up the weights just a bit, because I'm pretty close to where I want to be compositionally. Get that down. Get that piece in place. Let's put some foreground in this thing. Get a bit of a presence. Let's kind of just start blocking in some of the softscape here. What do you think, gang? There it is, just coming together very lightly. Just nice and easy. A little bit of softscape in this thing coming underneath here with, again, foliage. Just kind of takes the break off of these heavy-handed, sometimes very hard surfaces we're dealing with here. Again, the idea, the purpose today is to let you see how volumetrics is universal. It doesn't matter what your context is. It's all going to be a product of cylinders, cones, spheres, etc. All the 5 solids are going to play into everything we do here. Let's kind of get this all set up here. And I get this in place. Let's divide this guy. Let's put a little light source in this thing now. That's a shadow off of this building. Bit of surface in here. Let's take it back just a bit. Get a bit of background on this guy. Some depth back here, just enough to kind of give it some personality. Let me change the contour of the land just a touch. Again, notice how we're starting to really put all the pieces together here. Interesting how it all starts to come together once you understand what to do with how to work with these solids. Let's kind of run this forward. Let's run that forward. In the corner. Again, turn this around just a bit. Just cast that shadow off of this building and just get that kind of drop just a bit. Let's soften that off again. Real quick empathic little study here just to get some tone down and a sense of perspective about what these solids are doing. Again, sorry for being so redundant here, folks, but I think it's really important to notice that once again, notice how that thing all comes together, hopefully very, very quickly as a result of understanding how these solids begin to function, what a cylinder does, for example, in perspective, and then how to work with it in terms of laying down shape. And again, just getting enough animation in the form to really work for us here. Let's go into here. Go back and add a little bit of this, maybe some telecommunication signal up on top here. There it is. That's it. That goes there. That goes back in. That gets recessed. That drops off just a bit. This comes into shadow. As does this just a bit. Entryway. There's a detail on that. Some corporate work on top there. The identity of the building itself. Very quickly here, just to get some texture down, kind of finish off this vignette here. Bring the viewer into the composition. Strengthen some of the line weights. And before you know it, we're almost there. More detail underneath this guy. Get that on through. Hardscape it. More definition around the side here. And let's get this guy to kind of just come through the, notice working up that concentric center right there. Now I'll switch gears again, come back to normal. Take that stone pattern right off the page. There you are, gang. There's a nice, quick and dirty little thumbnail sketch of, let's add some little detail back, a little barren back here. And reflect some of that tree pattern right back in the building itself. And last but not least, let's frame it off with a little bit more of a vignette here. Let me turn it around here. A bit of sky tone back into this. Again, to drive the viewer right back into the actual composition. Run it right through. A little darker back here. Move it out. And just change the pace. There's another little study here, folks, on how that all begins to work. Hey, how you doing there, Pixel? Good to see you. Hope things have been going well. Yes, they have been. And yeah, thanks very much, Pixel. We're just trying to pick up on part 2 of the whole lesson on volumetrics and how they begin to function here. Pardon me as I sharpen the stick for a second. And let's kind of straighten this guy up just a little bit here. Yeah, I think we made a big deal last week out of getting into some of these sketches, for example, about getting into volumetrics and review form. All we're doing here, if you look at this sketch, there's nothing more there than just combining, for example, a cylindrical form with a rectangular form. We just laid it down and just thinned it up a little bit. So the idea there is how these volumetrics begin to work and how to understand the geometry thereof and what takes place when you work with them and deal with them, for example. Again, we started here, for example, the second sketch was a little plan view study, the cylinder, then the actual rectangular form, and then landscaping around it, the pathway, and then this little softscape piece that comes off of it. Then from there, you put a little bit of thumbnail sketch together, what the view might look like for the right view to kind of look at this piece. Again, working on the basics and the solids of the volumetrics themselves. And again, I cannot stress enough that we said this last week, and it's so true, that everything we see, everything we touch and build, for example, will be a product of volumetrics, how we combine those pieces together, all the 5 basic solids. The first one we did, Pixel, was this one. We did the same thing. We actually came back in the little thumbnail sketch. Here's a plan view of it. It's for a very large rectangular form and an intersecting vertical piece. A little thumbnail sketch of what the view might look like coming into it, and then all of a sudden just coming over the top of this thing and then taking that into context here and putting it into perspective to kind of give the idea of how simple the geometry is when you work with and understand, and I'm going to say this very carefully, how simple it becomes. I don't mean that to be detrimental, but how really efficiently simple it becomes once we understand how those solids begin to function. This, to me, is the secret of success. It's not a matter of drawing skill that does it. It's understanding why these guys work the way they do. It's so paramount, absolutely frightening how it all begins to work. So those are the pieces I'd really like to kind of stress here today. And there's an architectural piece that was done. The first one we did with the solids. And then the second was an architectural piece we did with the solids. Let's try one more here, just for what it's worth. We've got a little bit of time here. Let's do something a little bit more elaborate. This is a guy that always puzzles everybody. So we start out with this. We come here, and we go there, nice and loose. There it is. We come back through here, get a dry blind down. Again, working with the solids. And look at this guy. All it really is, I'm going to start right there. I'm going to leave that just as is, nice and light. Hey, how you doing there, gang? What do you think there, Pixels making sense? Let's leave it right there for the time being. There it is. I'm going to draw through this guy now. I'm going to start picking up volumes. I'm going to show you how a rectangular form, for example, on top of a dome or a sphere, let's kind of put this in place. Let's put that in place right there. Let's come off of that. Working with the solids. How simple that was. There it is. Real light form. Again, working with the basic geometry here. Nice and easy. Let's stop right there. Look at that. There it is. Hey, very good. Pixelate making sense, but it helps. I just reviewed you. Okay, very cool. All right, here we go, gang. What do you think? Is this making sense here, gang? Those of you out there? It's a little bit of tone in this thing now. Again, solid. This is more, it's just a rectangular form on top of a dome. For example, that's a big sphere that I just grafted on top of that cylinder. So let's kind of go after this thing. Let me sharpen this up just a moment. Let's tone it in. Get that pillar in place. Nice and subtle. Slowly building up the values a little bit here. Coming out of the page, hopefully. Nothing really fancy. Volumetrics. Pardon my silence here, gang. Just putting together the finishing touches on this guy. I'll let it go at that. Look how soft that is. I'm just going to emphasize some weights here. A little bit of horizon line, a little stronger. Take that through the shape, into that form itself. And there's a nice little thumbnail study based on a little transportation piece that is built on understanding the geometric solids. Very loose, nothing fancy, just to show you how it all begins to come together. So I'll just stop here for a moment. What do you think, gang? Making sense? But it helps. I just reviewed your book. Yeah, cool. Alrighty, let me just kind of sharpen this up a little bit here. Alrighty, and then last but not least, just kind of wrap it up with a very simple little gesture like this. What if we took this thing and just did the following? What if we just took a line and went... That's the same process. We just did the same thing. It's really interesting how, again, the same gesture, rectangular form, dome up on top. When you break that all down, it's very similar to the one we did last week. I can find it very quickly, not to bore you to death. But it was very similar to this shape right here. How we just took that same rectangular form, and it was an uphill run on it, and just dropped the cylinder, or pardon me, a sphere right on top of that, and developed that whole shape based on that whole process here. Again, we're going to wrap it up here for us here, folks, in Volumetrics. They've been very kind to kind of pay attention. The whole premise of this whole stream today was to really emphasize the fact that everything we see, everything we touch, everything we create will be a product of the 5 basic solids. Very interesting how that all begins to function. So to begin to understand how they all come together, for example, going back to that first page again that we worked with last week, so we're getting that whole idea of what they look like and how to develop them. Look what begins to happen here. This is nothing more than a generation of that shape up on top. This guy right here is nothing more than a combination of working with a rectangular form and, in this case, a spherical form, or even a conical form up on top of that upper, to kind of bring them together. That's the whole glory of understanding why these things are so solid. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. I hope it's been productive for you, and I hope I've explained myself. All right, let me stop there for a moment and to ask a question to those who are still tuned in. Am I communicating all right? Is this making sense? It was a lot of fun today because we took some of the liberty, for example, from last week. We did a lot of product work, putting the solids together, and then this week I just decided we kind of switch gears and have a little bit of fun and go back to the original sketches here. And there's the first one we did in architecture. That was kind of fun to work with. Same set of circumstances. that we put together a little, again, the plan view of the solids and then the perspective, what they might look like, then a finished piece. Same with this one, a little plan view study, pardon me, a perspective piece, then what it looked like, and just real rapid, quick, I think so, Doctor. Yeah. All right, thanks very much, Pixel. Appreciate it. I think we're communicating all right, coming along nicely here. Again, if I were to put this into one sentence about how it all begins to come together, it should be automatically understood. I don't mean it to be detrimental, but I think it should be automatically understood that the whole reason for understanding the mechanics of how it all works is to deliver the strength of the aesthetics when it's all said and done. Mechanics, aesthetics, how it mechanically works and how it aesthetically all comes together. So you've been very kind here today, folks. I really appreciate your time. Any questions or comments in closing here from anybody? Doug or Pix, anybody? Not sleeping in closet. That's good. So far, so good. It's good to have you back on board. Pix, hope you had a great rest. You certainly deserved it. It's nice to have you back on board, and thanks for tuning in here today. So let me close with this. Please feel free to visit my website at drcontrast.com. We've got some very interesting drawing lessons, very simple series here. Thank you, Doug. Very great to have you on board here. Please visit my website at drcontrast.com, where you'll find 9 interesting lessons on how to put all these pieces together. Again, drcontrast.com. And in closing here, I want to make an announcement. I want to thank Pixel very much for the information he's putting together on this little sketchbook. It looked great. When I saw you before you went on vacation, we looked at the first draft, and just about 2 or 3 little wiggles and changes, very minor pieces, and type and so forth were great. So excellent job, Pixel. Really appreciate it. Look forward to getting with you when you have a minute. And last but not least, again, I always finish off my broadcasts or streams with this very, very important statement, and it's so true, extremely true. Never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much, gang. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock on some G12 stuff, hopefully. Take care now. Thank you. Bye-bye.